Keir Starmer is going to use his speech today to say that the UK must wean itself off migrant labour.
Well, speaking at the Confederation of British Industry, he'll say the days of low pay and cheap labour are over, and the focus should instead be on training workers who are already in the country.
Well, it follows comments from the head of the CBI, Tony Danker, urging the Prime Minister to harness migration to try and promote economic growth.
And let's speak now to Liberal Democrat, former Secretary of State for Business and author of How to Be a Politician, Sir Vince Cable, who is giving a talk at the upcoming Hay Festival Winter Weekend. Hi, Vince.
Morning.
Thanks for coming here. So, what do you make of Keir Starmer's position here? Because there's been a lot of talk today, and I count myself on this as an ardent Brexiteer. He's making all the right noises to woo voters around migrant labour. Is this a U-turn or is clever politics?
Well, I think it is clever politics. I think we've got to separate out, in terms of Brexit, all the trade issues and the migration issues. I mean, I think it's now generally accepted across the British political spectrum that we're not going to go back to unlimited migration within a single market framework. But at the same time, we're going to have a relationship with the European Union, which is what the CBI and others are saying. If you want us to invest in labour-saving equipment, you know, we've got to have confidence, and to have confidence, we've got to have access to the European market. So, on the one hand, the CBI and many other people are saying, let's get back into a trade relationship, what Jeremy Hunt was saying yesterday. On the other hand, as Starmer and others are saying, we've just got to live with a world which will probably involve slower growth, but in which we have to emphasise operating without unrestricted, unskilled migration.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, what a difficult political climate there is at the moment for leaders of all of the parties. And I'm interested in the title of your book. It's called How to Be a Politician, 2,000 Years of Good and Bad Advice. Perhaps some of them will be listening to that. And, of course, you've got a great deal of experience, having been a business secretary in the coalition government as well. It's interesting because Labour is trying to position themselves as the position of the party of business. And yet here they are contradicting exactly what the CBI is calling for. And they have to try and weigh that up, don't they, to try and keep business on their side whilst also appealing to what we're all sort of calling now, obviously, the red wall voters.
Yeah, and it is a tricky balancing act. I think the key is around the word training. I mean, certainly when I was in government, we put a lot of emphasis on apprenticeships as a way of upgrading the British labour force. But the problem was the government then slapped on this apprenticeship levy, which is effectively a tax on training. It's ridiculous. Jeremy Hunt should have got rid of it in the budget, actually. But the whole way in which we deal with the training of people, upskilling the labour force, is very underdeveloped. And so that's a thing I would hope Mr Starmer goes for.
So looking back at your book title here, 2,000 Years of Good and Bad Advice, I mean, it seems like they could do some good advice at the moment in the Conservative Party. What advice have you found in your research which they could learn from?
Well, what I was addressing in this book, and I start off with an opening line, is sort of an imaginary conversation with a teenage young person who expresses an interest in being a politician, to which my reaction is, really? You know, there's all this sort of popular cynicism, which was captured in the quotation of Billy Connolly, the Glasgow comedian. Anybody who expresses a wish to be a politician should be forbidden forever becoming one. So, you know, there is a lack of trust. And I think the big challenge to all of us, regardless of party, is rebuilding the trust, which is being honest with the public about the scale of the challenges we have. And although there were things in the budget last week that I disagreed with, I think what was good about it, and where Hunt was right, was to spell it out rather brutally. You know, if you want good public services, we're going to have to pay our taxes for them. Something politicians have been reluctant to do in the past.
And talking about being honest with the public, the Deputy Prime Minister has been facing a number of allegations, hasn't he, in relation to bullying. He's in front of the Justice Committee today, and I don't know whether you take a view in all of this, but I think standards in public life matter, don't they? And I suppose if people are looking to a career in politics, you want to have good role models in those roles.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I was an MP for 20 years. A lot of things were happening. They were all brushed under the carpet. And I think one of the steps forward in recent years is that we now have a sense that there are standards that have to be observed. And whatever people think about Boris Johnson politically, the fact that at the end of the day he had to go because he was disregarding standards was a big stepping stone.
That's interesting. So you don't think it's a new toxic culture of politics that's emerging, and hence these inquiries and people losing their jobs? You actually think it's just that we're actually getting better at policing it?
I think that's right. Yeah. I think there are a lot of things that used to happen, sexual harassment, quote, bullying. It happened, but it was swept under the carpet. It was just assumed the kind of thing you did and could get away with. But now it's been brought out in the open, and the media's got an important role in that.
Talk about bad advice, Vince. This story on the front of the Mail today, I wonder what your take is on this, and that is MPs will be able to expense for their Christmas parties in the current economic climate. Surely that's a bad thing to do.
Well, I haven't read the story, but it's a terrible headline.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the big disasters in British politics was, of course, the expenses scandal back in 2008-9. Buying duck ponds and charging the taxpayers for it, and Christmas parties sounds as if it falls in the same category. I thought that problem had been dealt with, actually, because there is now an independent system for evaluating expense claims, and the idea that MP could simply buy a house and charge the mortgage to the public, I mean, all that's gone. But there are probably little abuses slipping through the system, and I think in the interests of confidence, the authorities have got to be very tough about it.
Could I quickly ask you at the moment, everyone's talking about Labour, way out in front in the polls. Where are the Lib Dems at the moment, your party? They seem to be absent from the battlefield.
Well, in terms of national aggregates, average polling, that's certainly true. But I think the way the Lib Dems will come back is the way they came back in 1997, 2010, elsewhere, which is by concentrating resources on area where we're clearly the main challenger to the Tory party. I mean, my old constituency, Twickenham, now a safe Lib Dem seat. It started that way. We were the alternative to the Conservatives. We won the seat. And there will be between 20 and 30 that we could realistically capture at the next election, and probably play a key role in the next Parliament on the back of that. So it will be locally based rather than sort of national averages.
And, do you miss Frontline politics? I know that you're obviously writing about it still, and indeed giving speeches this weekend at the Hay Festival winter weekend. But do you miss being in Parliament?
No, I'm glad I left, actually. I was still under 80, so still young enough to start a new career, which is what I'm doing, writing.
It's young in political terms these days. We look at Biden and Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Biden's talking about bidding for a new period of 4 years. I think it's a bit improbable, but the idea that people in their late 70s, early 80s are past it, I just don't buy that. I do business, I do academic stuff, I write books, and that's a worthwhile career.
OK, Vince Cable, former business secretary and Liberal Democrat leader. Thank you very much indeed. And author, no less. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Superb. Thanks for your time.